Hi, here's May, and for this final week of May, I have part 3 of drawing Genshin characters for Mermay for you. Similar to the last parts, I'll talk about my process of drawing the characters, mainly mentioning what I noticed and learned about anatomy and designing the outfits. Since this is the final part, in the end I'll reflect on my biggest takeaways from doing this project and rank the illustrations. This whole project helped me to learn about drawing anatomy for upper bodies a lot, and I hope it can inspire you and leave you with some anatomy tips as well. The first character for this video will be Wanderer. The full body pose was a bit more unusual and complex, but drawing the anatomy for it wasn't too difficult for me since I had drawn backs for Chongyun Xingqiu's illustration before. For the full body poses I used photo references, so I also had this reference on the side which helped. For the foreshortening, I think the hips and the beginning of the fishtail might have turned out too thin here though. For the half body lower pose, getting the face and hair to work and not having the face kind of protrude too much was a bit of a struggle. The anatomy worked well here, but I don't like how curved the deltoids are. I've heard from other artists that they shouldn't be portrayed as just rounded, but rather using angled lines. This works well to me most of the time, but I'm not always sure about how many changes of direction I want to include and how many lines look nice. It also changes up with each pose. What I notice now is that for Wanderer's portrait pose, the eyes are a bit far apart on the face. The left eye should be more forward. This tended to happen during this project with 3/4 views especially. Also, the hair didn't have enough volume at first to me. The faces tend to look more realistic and not as stylized when the hair volume and overall head sphere is rather small. So I tried to keep this in mind, but I also don't want the characters to look too young and cutesy since it wouldn't match with the detailed anatomy I used for the illustrations. The biggest struggle for this illustration and what I spent a lot of time on here was figuring the outfit out. I had many ideas for outfit pieces I wanted to include, especially for the middle space between the half body and full body pose. I wanted to fill up this empty space with an outfit piece and I was unsure how. I wanted to include flowy outfit pieces and something asymmetrical for the arms since he also has this nice blue cape on only one side of his outfit in the game. For the colors, I again was inspired by the game. I went with a blue fishtail right away, and even though I tried some other variations with gradients, in the end I went with this and included gradients on the smaller flowy parts of his outfit only. Wanderer has straight hair, and making the bangs especially look nice was a bit difficult to me since I wanted the hair to be flowy because he would be underwater, but I'm not sure if I like how the hair structure turned out. Maybe you'll notice that I tried to include varying line thickness and make especially the silhouette lines and elements closer to the viewer or where shadows are thicker. I try to pay attention to this during the line art stage, but when I want to make this effect even more intense, what I like to do is to select all my line art in the end and make the selection a bit bigger and soften it. Then on a new layer under the line art, I like painting in some areas using an airbrush to vary the line thickness even more. Now we move on to the second character for this video, which will be Kaeya. Figuring out the fishtail so that it would align nicely with the rest of the poses as well as his right arm was a big struggle here. Making the perspective of the upper body work was a bit difficult for me as well. The torso turned out too wide to me. I would find a thinner waist just more visually appealing. It doesn't have enough changes in direction. In case you've already seen part 1, you know that I used references for the full body poses, while for the other ones I only did it sometimes. For the upper half body pose here, I had some references of people at similar angles but not of the exact pose, and with the foreshortening that was going on, this was difficult to draw. Usually I'd recommend using references especially for more complex and foreshortened poses, but I couldn't find one that looked exactly like the pose I wanted to go for Kaeya here, so I just combined what I saw in all the reference images I had. It was difficult to figure the pose out since there are many overlaps and parts hidden because of the foreshortening. What was important to me was that it overall was curved enough and conveying enough of the perspective. The upper body turned out too long. For the head, it at first was way too small the way I sketched it. I wanted to figure out how I could make the pose look realistic angle-wise. At first, the head was tilted too much downwards to me, so I tried getting into a similar pose myself and noticed it's possible to get your head to look up higher, so I changed the angle of the head. For the portrait pose, getting a face shape I liked was a bit difficult, but it worked pretty nicely. And whenever I draw Kaeya, I draw in both eyes, even though one is usually covered up, to make sure the placement of the eyes on the head works. Choosing the colors I would use for the fishtail was difficult to me. I was unsure whether I would want to go for purple, white or black fishtail. However, since I already had drawn 3 characters with a black one and 1 with a white one, I decided to go for purple. I had a few ideas for different outfit pieces to include. It was all inspired by his outfit in-game, but with slight modification. Along the way, I decided to remove the outfit piece around his waist since it was too visually overwhelming to me. Similar to when I drew Zhongli, I had different ponytail variations and drawing his hair was really nice. I especially like how it turned out for the portrait pose. During the line art stage I had hair strands as details, but I decided to not include them in the final version. It was too much to me, but you'll probably only really notice this when you pay close attention to the time-lapse. I also added more saturated parts into the skin shading here, which I didn't do for the other illustrations, but I think it makes the skin look nicer, so I'll probably include more of this in the future. And now for the final character I'll talk about, which is Albedo. You see that the alignment of the poses I used here changed over time. In the beginning I went for a different fishtail for the full body pose. I tried many variations while sketching since I wasn't happy with how flowy it looked. This was the illustration where I was experimenting the most with what poses I would want to include. In the end, for the half body pose, I again wanted to do a foreshortened one to see if it would be easier to draw since I had already done a pose similar to it for Kaeya. This way I would also be able to see if it would look better if I had improved with my foreshortening for a pose like this. I sketched in the head for this foreshortened pose, but it was difficult to figure out what head pose I would want to go for. I was again asking myself what is humanly possible and how high can you stretch your head. Then I also wanted to include a foreshortened hand for the upper pose and I tried coming up with it myself at first, but I didn't like how it looked. It looked too white to me, so I instead drew a hand from reference. While I at first was thinking about using more different colors and including blue as well as gold similar to his regular outfit in-game, I in the end went with just browns and golds. I thought that it would complement Kaeya's illustration I did before nicely since I mainly used purples there. I tried out a few different versions for the fishtail colors here, including white and black combined with the brown. The head of the foreshortened pose looked too flat to me at first, and with Albedo's hairstyle, something that's nice is that the strands follow the head sphere pretty closely since he has some of it tied back. By making these strands more rounded and transforming the face a bit, I tried to make the head fit more into the perspective. The eyes for the full body pose at first were way too far apart, which I changed up later on when exporting the images. And finally, here are some of my biggest takeaways from doing this project. What I mostly struggled with while working on this project were figuring out the flowiness of the fishtail, the anatomy, the alignment of poses, and what outfit parts as well as colors I would include. So these things are what I also want to improve on in the future. I want to work on my composition, perspective, gesture, anatomy, and outfit design. And here are some more specific changes I want to make and things I want to pay attention to. For the eyes, I want them to not be too intensely shaded, especially for bigger eyes. And I want the iris to be more rounded and in the correct perspective, so the eye doesn't look too flat. Then I want to make the outline of the eyes a bit thicker and clear. I also tend to draw the eyes a bit too far apart, the arms and neck too long and the chest a bit too small oftentimes, so I want to pay attention to this in the future by asking myself if any of this is the case for the illustration I'm currently working on. What I also want to pay attention to is the size of the hair and its volume in comparison to the face and jaw shape. I want to establish a nice ratio so the hair doesn't look too realistic and not too stylized and cute. Then there is the ratio of the head to the body. Depending on the character I'm drawing and their age, I want to use a fitting size. Since I like to use more realistic but still slightly stylized proportions, I want the heads to be bigger than for realistic humans but not too big, so the character doesn't look too young. For the anatomy and drawing bodies, I want to include more changes and directions to not have the bodies look as flat, and having more variation in the line thickness is also something I would like to experiment with. After doing all the character illustrations, I also made some illustrations with pairs of the characters I drew. I drew illustrations for Chongyun Xingqiu since they are my favorite Genshin ship, and then I also drew one for Child and Zhongli, one for Kaeya and Albedo, and one for Zhao and Renti. I also used some 3D model pose references for all pair illustrations. That's it for other additional illustrations I made for Mermay. Finally, here's how I would personally rank the illustrations by how they turned out, and here by how much I like the outfit designs only. You can also leave a comment about which illustration you like the most. And with that, this final video for Mermay this year comes to an end. Maybe I'll do this challenge again next year, just like last year. It's a nice way to see the improvements you made over 1 year. If you enjoyed seeing this video and haven't seen the other ones, you can also check them out. Thanks for watching and have a great day. Bye!